Welcome to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times, sponsored by MSA Safety. In this series, we bring you sessions from the Emergency Services Show and the Emergency Tech Show 2025. Amazon Web Services sponsored the Emergency Tech Leaders Stage. In this episode, hear from AWS Head of Nonprofit Charlie Anderson and her panel as they explore how the emergency services are using cloud-based technology to innovate at scale and improve operational efficiency.
Let's get started with you, Charlie, if we can. Give us the lay of the land. How does cloud computing fit in with the modern emergency services?
It's a really interesting question because let me just, for context, give you my background. So I spent 16 years as an operational police officer in the Met in London, super busy. And one of my frustrations for me and also for my officers was an inability to access information or intelligence at a point that I needed it. So I made the decision to move into technology about 10 years ago now and went to AWS. So AWS is a cloud computing organization. It's one of the world's largest. It has the most broad range of services. And I think when you look at the value that cloud brings to the emergency services, it's about putting information or data into a location where it's easily shared, moved from organization to organization or team to team. And in 2017, we began our journey with the UK Emergency Services to see how we could use cloud technology to enable the front line.
So who wants to pick up off that? How did that journey then take off into operational emergency work?
Yes, so Dan James, Bedfordshire Police, where we started was looking at all those disconnected silo systems sitting on on-prem databases, and how do we bring them together to enable our frontline officers to access that information at that exact time that they need it from all of those systems securely, safely, with the right approvals. And then Rob will go on to how we make sure that they have the right permissions and structures and such there. But we partnered with AWS back in 2021, I think was when we did an agreement with AWS to move, and we've built capability now within Bedfordshire Police to integrate through, again, Rob will go into the technical side of things, but integrate through APIs and CSV extractions, all that data from silo source systems into that cloud layer through tabling securely, which we'll probably go on to as well, to enable access to data across silo systems really efficiently at a single access point to an officer, whether they're an intelligence officer behind a desk or they're a frontline officer out and about on their phones. So straight access to multiple sources of data efficiently at the time that they need it to make that operational decision as efficiently as possible, and most importantly with all the information to hand to enable them to make the most informed decision rather than decision on a limited set of data. And some people in here will be familiar with the difference between, say, a tactical and a strategic firearms commander role and the volume of intelligence or information used to make a decision. And tactically, we're looking at, say, a single piece of information in a control room, whereas strategically, you're looking at all information. Well, you're able to make a better decision if you can look at all information, aren't you? You're able to make a better informed decision. But why limit that to that strategic commander? Why not enable those frontline officers to, with the use of all that information, make that really informed decision rather than a decision on one or two limited pieces of information because of the time pressures or location pressures of where they are?
Before we come on to the technology, I just want to stick with you for a moment, Dan, because any police officers in the room, or to be honest, any blue light personnel, paramedics, fire, whatever, you're accessing multiple systems, drawing from all these different systems, whether it's the PNC, your intelligence database, your local document storage, something your sergeant has sent you. Are we talking about everything being on the cloud here? And how do you pick and choose?
No, so what we're looking at is data staying at rest, data staying in the solution that it's already been built within. So whether that's your on-prem server or in a different cloud environment or wherever it may be. And we build and connect through tables, which means that we can call on the data in the back-end tables when there is a requirement to see that data, but the data stays at rest in the source. So data isn't transferred and held in the cloud solution. Data is held in your secure, already governed with the correct MOPI, say data retention policies and security frameworks and guidance, but we're able to call through the data when we need it to make that decision and not have duplicate stores of data in the cloud, potentially creating a risk that there's an additional data storage. But again, we'll talk about the safety of the cloud and how that is actually benefiting us.
Did you want to come in?
Yeah, I do, because I think you've been a police officer as well, and I know that you haven't, but you work really, really closely with us, right? I think when you've been a police officer, so I was a public order specialist, I was a firearms officer, you need to be able to make your decisions quickly. And we're not talking about a simple decision like what I'm going to buy for dinner. We're talking about decision making that can quite literally be life and death situations. And so when you're making those decisions without the full picture, without every single piece of data, intelligence, information that you need to make that, that increases the risk. And so if you think about why I left policing in the first place, my biggest challenge was silo data, as Dan said, that I would have to go through multiple systems just to bring together some information that may or may not be 100% up to date. It may or may not be updated because somebody has recently been arrested for something and we don't have that full picture. That obviously has a significant impact and risk to any police organisation and to any individual police officer at the time. So I think when AWS began this journey and actually bridged into law enforcement, it very much came from that as a how do we enable decisions to be made quickly but fully informed with all access to absolutely everything that you might need to go and do whatever it is that needs to be done, rather than hoping that you know everything you need to.
So it's time to bring in the tech expert on the panel. Robert, you know, many people, their experience of using cloud services is sending their relative a Dropbox link to some photos. You get an email back 2 days later, or the link doesn't work, or it's expired. I mean, that's no good for emergency services. Talk us through the technology, the resilience, interoperability, how this all plugs in.
So that separating people's minds, the web and the cloud, because people do, the web is a delivery mechanism, you can see web browsers. The cloud is really a scalable solution. You know, it replaces the old data centers, but it gives you resilience. But more importantly, it's managed by people who know exactly what to do. So if we want to store data, or we want to process data, and we want to use data, where the cloud changes everything is redundancy across different geos. The data centers are protected, they're backed up. It's all just done for you. And what you can focus on is doing your operational job. That's the absolute key. What the cloud then brings is ubiquity of data. So all of those different data sources, when connected well, you will literally provide a single layer across the top, and everyone gets the right data at the right time in real time. And that ubiquity of data is the key to the cloud and delivering out. And some people call it democratization of data or ubiquity, whatever term you want to use, that's what makes the difference. You know, in the nicest possible way, I'm not an operational cop, I'm a dev, I'm an architect, that's what I do. But my job is to make sure that the right person has the right data at the right time, and they don't have to think about it. That's not a derogatory comment, as in, you look at your phone, the data should be there. So I've got to do a quick, in 2Serve, what we've done is, so we have a policing product called 2Serve, and it literally connects to 30 or 40 different systems, and then through the cloud, it delivers it to operational officers in real time. But we do a separate thing. We actually predict what they're going to need and deliver it to their device before they've even asked for it. And we've got about a 95%, because beds actually deploy 2Serve, a 95% hit rate of delivering data to officers in the field before they know they even need the data.
That's amazing. And what do the cops say when you talk to them?
Well, the thing is that in the nicest possible way, they don't notice. A really well-built solution in the cloud should be as simple as just, I want this, and it's there for you. I think they take, in the nice way, they take it for granted. It's just, you open it up, you ask for the data, it's there, it works. But it does a whole ton of extra things that if, say, PNC is down or whatever systems are down, all of that's taken care of. we pre-cache data. The cloud allows us to do all of that work. And 2SIRF has intelligent caching, both in the cloud level, the delivery level, and on the device, whether that's the phone or a tablet, whatever you're using. So the officer just keeps working.
That was, of course, entirely hypothetical. Everyone knows that the PNC never goes down.
Yeah. or a theatre or whatever it's going to be.
So on that, can you talk us through the resilience then? Because Dan was talking about things being on-prem, on-premises. There is something about seeing that box, that computer under your desk and thinking, I can see it, I can turn it off and on, I know it's there, I trust it. But actually, that's not the safest, most secure mechanism.
It's been an interesting transition period, certainly in the blue lights that we've been working with, that security is inbound, and now the realization that the sheer scale of security that the cloud delivers, it's incredibly secure. The key part, though, is if you're a blue light organization, you can partition off a piece of the cloud, which is just your organization, and it becomes a part of your organization. And the external organizations like AWS can't see into your use of AWS. That's absolutely crucial. But that scaling and that ability to just use every service you need in real time. But the boxes under the desk, I think when we first went into blue light 20 years ago, the number of critical servers that were on boxes under desks was a little bit disturbing. Then it went into the private data centers. Now it's moving into the cloud, the security, and more importantly, the availability. Because we want that data to be in the blue light first responders' hands immediately. And if the box gets turned off, which happens, it's no use to anyone.
So Charlie, can you talk us through then AWS's role in that resilience and security? Because full disclosure, BBC iPlayer sits on AWS servers, but if Doctor Who goes down, it's not going to kill someone. If Athena goes down, PNC can't be accessed, there's vital information not available. That really, as you were saying earlier, can be life or death.
Yep.
How do you work with the Home Office, with police forces then to ensure that security?
So I think fundamentally, let's just talk about cloud and what it is. You know, over the years, we've heard jokes about how friends don't let friends own data centers or make data centers. We do know of organizations that obviously have had those servers or whatever hiding under a desk. That's not ideal. It's far from ideal in policing, but ultimately, if things are going to be switched off, it will happen and you'll lose everything you need. And when you look at cloud technology, cloud-based technology is designed to, firstly, it's sovereign by design. So in AWS, we do everything with security at the heart of what we do. We architect for resilience. So depending on how the infrastructure is designed, and our team work case by case, force by force, on understanding their operational need, their requirement, and then guiding them around how to architect a solution to make sure that if it's leveraging an availability zone, selection of data centers, and something happens in that availability zone, that it already redundantly falls over, it moves over to the next availability zone. And that's happening at the same time constantly. So if there is a problem, it's already moved and it's already addressed and it's being focused. And I say that in really simple terms because I don't want to bog down with the technical detail. But in essence, if you think about the way that a police force needs access to their information and data, that's an always on, always available. And then depending on what's happening, you might suddenly need a massive amount of capacity or capability. It needs to be able to scale out at the same time as scaling up. You cannot do that with a data center or a server under a desk. So one of the benefits of cloud is that elasticity to be able to do that exactly when you need it. So we worked with the National Crime Agency a few years ago now to have a look at how they could move some of their data from the National Cybercrime Unit into cloud-based technology. Really fascinating case because the NCCU work to reduce threat and harm for cybercrime, but the most serious of cybercrime. And there was an incident a few years ago where, having worked with AWS and a partner, Contino, we're big fans of partner organizations, they were able to build out technology that meant that when there was an incident that was multinational, working with Interpol, with the FBI and others, not only could they build that solution out very quickly, hours, not months, they were able to go on to execute more than 75,000 arrests, seize $54 million in cash, or £54 million in cash, $75 million in dollars, and actually could proactively go out and arrest people who were using technology to share messages to plan to kill people or to move money launder, for example. So that whole solution, built safely and securely in the cloud, allowed them to go very quickly out, very quickly up, and work with international counterparts to effect those arrests.
Yeah, that's amazing. Dan, Charlie was talking there about that elasticity, capacity, capability. You know, your run-of-the-mill shift might be executing a warrant, do some vehicle checks, but of course there are those huge major incidents, you know, multi-casualty incidents, interoperability requirements to work with our colleagues in the other sectors. How does the cloud enable that to happen easier, better, quicker?
So having multiple emergency services partners in the AWS SaaS cloud environment, for example, having your own environment within that cloud enables you to have your own secure area, your landing zone for your data, your service, whether that be your employees, your vetting, your operational data, whatever that may be, within your own environment. But then in that cloud, having multiple environments, so the police environment, for example, fire service environment, and ambulance environment, we've got that multi-agency incident, that make incident, and we need to come together and share that information. What we're able to do is have a area within that SaaS cloud that is accessible through the authorizations within your organizations and agreed data sharing agreements across your organizations to come together, bring that data through automation, efficient sharing of information into a single environment so that decision makers across the services are able to view the data in one place to make that informed decision swiftly without, and we've had it locally with incidents and where it's manual spreadsheets, it's manual gathering of data really fast by people, human element. Then they're bringing that together. Then they're manually putting that on a sheet. What does that mean? The cloud enables us to do that through automation. And one of the examples, I'll come on to an example where we're seeing that human efficiency in our area through that cloud automation is something called Clare's Law, which some of you may not be aware of. Clare's Law is where we notify a potential person at risk that they may be in a relationship with a potential domestic abuse perpetrator. And there's another one called Sarah's Law where that person may be a registered sex offender. And Clare's Law, there's two methods of a person at risk potentially being notified. One is that they can inquire, or someone on their behalf can inquire and ask the police, do we know any information about that individual that suggests they may be a domestic abuse perpetrator, and can we safeguard that individual? Now that comes through a form and business as usual process. Some of you, if you work in this environment, will know that form comes in through single online home, that goes into an email, that sits in an email inbox, that then sits in someone's work tray. They then manually go on, okay, what information do we know on our record management system, on our command and control system, on all our other systems, put that all together and then go, okay, what's the landscape of my information saying? Now what do I do next? Oh, I've got to fill out this form, send that to the supervisor. Can that be signed off? Fill out the next form, generate a form of words, fill out that, get that signed off. All that process is hours and hours and hours of work, but the whole of that process is risk time where that person at risk is in contact with that domestic abuse perpetrator. There's another element, and I'll come on to the other element because both of them are impacted together, is where the police have a right to tell someone. So it's called a right to know. Someone has a right to know, the other one was right to ask, right to know if they're in a relationship with a domestic abuse perpetrator. And we've, as the police, have got that responsibility where if in our information as an organisation, we know that the domestic abuse perpetrator is in a potential relationship with a new person at risk, we should be informing that person. Now, that requires a human constantly scanning all of our source data as an organisation, intelligence reports, command and control system logs, crime files, road traffic collision documents that say they were in a car together, any piece of information that may say, hang on a minute, this person is potentially in a new relationship and we've got a right to inform that person to safeguard them. Now, at the moment, that's just not feasible. To do that manually with disconnected data in on-prem storage solutions and a human scanning that information means that we're just not able, and no fault of our own, to identify all of those opportunities and also all that hidden risk within our information as an organisation. And should that end up in a domestic homicide and a a review, we had that information and we didn't act on that as an organization. So how can we use AWS's SaaS cloud architecture, drawing our data together and then leveraging large language models, LLMs, those unfamiliar with LLMs, ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, others available in the market, LLMs in the cloud. What we're able to do is through that cloud architecture is data is at rest in our source systems. We've got our list of our domestic abuse perpetrators. Constantly, 24 hours a day, every day, scanning every source system in entity extraction, in columns and rows of defined text, but also in free text, in collision reports, in command and control logs, where maybe a link hasn't been directly made in a system. Our large language model and the power of using large language models in the cloud, in that 24-hour scan, is able to identify all these opportunities within our data to say, hang on a minute, this person may be in a relationship. It's not saying this person is in a relationship and you must do X. It's saying this may be a relationship here and you may want to review this. But what that means is that the human isn't scanning, it's brought to the surface, and then the human, with that information from all those systems, is able to make an informed decision as whether to act or not act, and also now record rationales as to whether we're not acting as well. Very important should something happen down the line. What that's meant in Bedfordshire Police, because that's the big, well, so what? What's it meant in Bedfordshire Police? Well, it's meant that we're looking this year at a 340% increase in Clare's Law disclosures made in 1 year compared to last year in our organisation. And straight away, everyone's going to go, well, how on earth do you cope with that demand increase? How are you going to deliver up to 2,000 of these Clare's Law forms every single year? Because we're not growing the amount of people that are doing this. So how are we going to do this? Well, again, the power of the cloud, the power of using large language models that we couldn't have on-prem in our environment, means that not only can we identify the opportunities, we can now drive efficiencies in manual administrative processes to automate supporting of filling out documents, generating text that is supporting the human in their process. Ultimately, it's the human decision maker, the human that signs it off. But what that has meant is that we're saving 4.5 hours on document generation on every single application that comes through. So we're saving all the research time because that's automated for us, and then document generation down 4.5 hours, which means that with the same amount of people harnessing the power of the cloud architecture, we're able to drive a capability, which means that we are better safeguarding the people of Bedfordshire, which is fantastic use of the cloud. And it's seeing now within our organisation a 4% decrease in repeat domestic abuse incidents coming into the organisation as well, as a direct outcome of disclosures being proactive against information we already had available. It was already in our systems. We're now just making it accessible, and that's the key bit. We're now making stuff we already had. We're not collecting more and new information. We're making information we had accessible to decision makers when they need it to make an informed decision and safeguard.
This episode of the Emergency Services Times podcast is sponsored by MSA Safety, proudly supporting emergency services and first responders on the front line. At MSA Safety, protecting first responders isn't just what we do, it's who we are. We work closely with fire and rescue services across the UK to develop and deliver safety solutions designed to meet your ever-evolving needs. That includes MSA Bristol Firefighter PPE, trusted by services across the UK and beyond, shaped through years of collaboration with frontline teams. It also includes our growing investment in innovation and technology, from the connected M1 SCBA modular solution to our agile, fully managed service model that helps keep crews protected and ready to respond. But for us, safety goes beyond equipment. We believe in standing shoulder to shoulder with the people who dedicate their lives to protecting others, whether it's supporting firefighter charities, backing mental health initiatives, or showing up for community events. MSA is proud to be part of the emergency services family. To learn more about our work in the UK and how we're supporting first responders every step of the way, visit www.msasafety.com. With MSA Safety, when you go in, we go in with you.
This is amazing, Charles.
This is possibly why I wound up leaving policing, because I really enjoyed being a police officer. It's a tough job. and you go through an awful lot. But when you hear things like this and you see where technology is absolutely enabling the front line to do what you joined for, to do what you put the uniform on for, which ultimately is to protect people, I think for me is just the most incredible thing. When you think about Dan's example, the thing that really, really strikes me is the human in the loop, the human in the center of this. So we've just touched on effectively some building blocks of AWS technology, whether that is artificial intelligence, tools and skills, data analytics, security we've already talked about briefly. Bringing all of those things together fundamentally to do something that has a real life impact, again, going back to that threat to life. When I began my journey with AWS, and one of the things that I know that the team just over there on the booth right there to the right are really excited about is going in and meeting customers like Dan and saying, okay, if you could do anything at all that would make your job easier or maybe less risky, or ensure that you could go home and think, I 100% put my uniform on and I did everything I could to change that situation. Going into that police force with some incredible technologists and hearing about those problems and then saying, okay, well, we could whiteboard. So Amazon has a culture of innovation that it's our DNA, culture of innovation. Everything that we do has innovation at the heart of it. And we're continually looking at and pushing the boundaries of technology and technology capabilities. Hot topics at the moment, AI, now we're into generative AI or agentic AI, and that continues to move at pace. We can't do everything that we need to do as a police officer. What we can do is we can put the information into a system. We can let the technology give us some signposts, not the answers, because we're still going to investigate that data. And then we're going to go out, we're going to execute on that to make a difference to society. The culture of innovation and the workshops that the team have done ultimately lead to these kind of outcomes and solutions. We already see, like the public, the general public, we take for granted, picking up on your point actually about the things that the officer takes for granted. We take technology for granted. We can move money on our phone. We can get car updates on our phone. I can quite literally manage my entire life on a mobile device. And the public expect that same level of service, that fast, efficient response in a time when the worst possible situation is happening to them. And so being able to look at the difference that technology can bring and look at how you can then bring technology into the playing field speeds things up, and actually it does reassure the public. It does give them the answers that they need, maybe they didn't know they needed, and it allows that informed, fast decision making. One of the things that I found really exciting with the team as they were building out demos was how you can use AI and chatbots to speed up the engagement for the public to contact the police. Because we all know 999, we know 111. The reality of it is, going back a couple of years now, 70% of 101 calls, let's not call the NHS, 101 calls were not even a police matter. They had nothing to do with the police, and yet 70% of those calls were distracting the officer from doing what they actually needed to do. But using AI and chatbots to actually signpost some of those questions, I don't know, in Devon and Cornwall, can I park my car by this beach? Genuinely a question that they were getting asked. Using technology to answer some of those questions means that they can focus on the emergency calls or the not quite emergency calls that come through that system. That's all through trial and error. That's through trying things, seeing if it works in a safe environment before you think about how do you deploy that at scale in a police force.
And I think just to echo that one, so we've got a 101 chatbot live in Bedfordshire Police, and I know other forces have as well. But one of the other elements where the technology comes to life is people are able to now communicate with us in their native language. So we don't need to have a Urdu-speaking officer on the end of the phone to a Urdu-speaking member of the public. They're able to communicate in their native language, and the translation and the automation. I think we've got 172 off the top of my head languages that one does the translation in and out. And then also it scans and goes, they go, I need to go and report a fly tipping incident. Thank you very much. has that human interaction conversation, signpost them to the local authority website, to the link that they need there and then to go and report that. And overnight, 30% of demand straight out the door that we now don't need to answer phone calls to, we have a human element on chatbot as well. But then the other element, which is absolutely brilliant about the chatbots, is it's able to alert us when someone puts something, they go, oh, hang on a minute, they've just mentioned a significant keyword or something around, say, a threat or an act of violence, and it will go straight through to an operator. So that we're not going, okay, we're hiding that and no one's ever going to look at that again. It's a live.
I mean, if someone's on a chatbot and they're suggesting they're going to harm themselves or someone else or something like that,
Yeah. It will flag straight through to a call handler, chats on their screen, and they can talk to them straight away. So it's straight through. So there's the safeguarding mechanisms there as well that are built into that chatbot function. So it's not a hidden, you're never going to talk to a person again function. It's that relationship. And all of what we're doing here, all of this technology, as you've just said, it's about harmonizing the human and the computer relationship to get the best possible efficiencies and demand management for the organization.
And let's be clear, sorry.
Sorry?
This is industry standard technology, right? This is technology that banks use, that all kinds of organizations use. And people expect to be able to have that conversation. And just because we're using some kind of chatbot doesn't mean to say that we don't still have that human in the loop. And for me, that powerful thing around being able to identify keywords, key threats, key risks, and immediately shift it to the right person who is trained to respond to that human is beyond words. I mean, I'm a Beds resident, so obviously I'm delighted that my Home Force immediately put this in. But ultimately, that means that if I need help and I'm scared and I don't want to phone, I can still use that because it's going to be picked up by a human anyway, because that risk, the risk words are literally in the system, straight to a human, and I get the help that I need.
So that's the picture in Bedfordshire. What's the national picture? Is this something that's already been rolled out and it's there and nobody's noticed? How does this work?
I'm not the right person to make that.
Let me just give you my view. So AWS work with a number of police forces in the UK. If we go back to when my journey started back in 2017, that was very early days. And at that time, we were having to have conversations about what is cloud. AWS launched its UK region in 2017. And then over the next 12 months, we worked with technology regulators and policing bodies to ensure that our technology was police assured secure. That's really important because that meant I could go back to a chief constable and I could say, okay, so this is the cloud, this is how it works. There was still some nervousness and reticence, and I absolutely get that. And what we need is more thought-leading forces like Beds who are absolutely willing to go that mile and try it, again, in a safe environment. We see now more and more police forces are using technology in different ways, innovative ways, all kinds of things. We've talked about chatbots, we've talked about data analytics, we've talked about risk assessments and how you can do all of that. There are still some forces out there who are maybe not quite there yet. They see what other forces are doing. There is a bit more of a driver. I think a few years ago, there was very much this cloud first suggestion, but ultimately independent police forces will make their own decisions and that is absolutely their right. We encourage police forces who are thinking, well, could I do something differently, to come to AWS, have a look and see what can be done to support them. Again, trialing, building a proof of concept, failing fast. But I do think as you look around the policing organisations now, and I know on this stage over the next 2 days, there are some fascinating conversations being done. We see more and more police forces doing this already and actually being more and more comfortable, because the more examples of Clare's Law that you see, where technology is helping those police officers to fundamentally save a life, is incredibly powerful.
Robert, can I bring you in on the connectivity? So when I was in the police, it was Central Scotland. It was when Airwave replaced VHF. And if I went up to a call in Cranlarich, my Airwave signal dropped off. My colleagues in Northern Constabulary, as it was, on the Highlands and Islands, wouldn't get VHF signal. They'd have to use their car as a repeater, et cetera, et cetera. How can you ensure, how does the technology ensure that cops, wherever they are in the UK, have the connection that they need to access the data in the first place?
Well, there's two different parts. One, when you're thinking about the cloud versus on-premise and in forces, one of the advantages of the cloud is it's better connectivity to the all of the data centers used by AWS. So whereas if you're an in-force DC, chances are there'll be 2 cables going in, and if a digger goes through them, you might lose connection. That's rare now, but it does happen. When it's out and about mobilization, it's then down to the applications on the device, and that makes a massive difference. So I'll mention 2serve because that's the one I wrote. 2serve on the device caches all the data in a secure, encrypted part of the phone or the tablet. So wherever you are, you remember I said that prediction? We predict all the data you need. We have it on the device. So even if you went down into the basement in the middle of in a flat in London, you still lose the connectivity there. What we actually do is we predict it on the call you're going to. We harvest all the data of the people who are going to be in that building. They're ready for you to search on, so you can literally search offline all the data you need in real time. And that's live in beds, cams, hearts. So separating out connectivity and caching, the service layer in the cloud and caching, because again, if Athena or PNC or PND are offline, that intermediate layer in the cloud, which again 2serve delivers in AWS, it keeps everything live for you. So imagine if you fill in an MG11, the device has to cache it, then go to the next level, and if the back-end system's not ready for it, which is on-prem still, that cloud has to be able to deal with that. And that's down to intelligent design sitting on top of the cloud. And just say, if you don't know, 2serve over there, we do all of that by default. There you go.
What can you tell us on an open stage with an open audience about the security and encryption that makes sure this data doesn't fall into the hands of, not just some bored guy in their mum's attic, but, Russia or Iran or North Korea, an actual, serious threat to UK security?
So, this is where certainly the blue light services, because they're sitting behind government gateways, have a huge advantage. There's huge teams of anonymous people dealing with a lot of that threat. Let's not talk lovely people. Let's not talk about those. But when you talk about an individual device, the devices themselves have to be encrypted. They have to be connected to the cloud with encrypted connections all the way. So I can only talk about how we do it. We actually deliver what's called a rotating crypto key, which can be every 30 seconds, giving us 2 advantages. So the officer on the ground will receive a runtime key. All of the imagery they take, every line of text is cryptographically signed, so we can prove from the point it was taken all the way into court that nothing's been tampered with. So think about anti-tampering to start with, but also somebody then gets hold of the device. 2serve has anti-tampering technology, so you try and strip that data, the phone shuts itself down, and all of the data is reported back as dirty, and then it has to be manually checked by a human. So we can encrypt and check data from the device all the way through to the cloud and back again in real time. And the officers, all they see is a little green dot in the top corner, and everything just works. But that's how it should be. Going back to the ubiquity of data, ubiquity of security, and ease of use.
Let me just pick up on that. So I think I want everyone to just imagine for a minute life without a mobile phone, right? It was really tough. We take it for granted. My kids that cannot believe that the internet hasn't always been around, or that they've not been able to access something instantaneously. Dial up, not even on their level. Now, when you think about cloud technology, what we are talking about in essence at AWS is an architecture that comprises of regions. Regions are geographical locations made up of availability zones, which are made up of data centers, and they're all plugged together. So AWS completely, it owns its networking, its cabling capability. It's all connected. It's ours. There's nothing else that is part of that. That is our infrastructure. And where we talked about resilience earlier on, it's the same thing. So it's a little bit like you turn on your lights, they work, you switch it off, you don't pay for that aspect. You're not using that connectivity, you're not using that energy or electricity. But it's still there just because it's not switched on. It's still physically there. And I think that's one of the greatest benefits of cloud-based technology, because the way that it's built and the way that it's designed, those availability zones are far enough apart that they're not on the same risk profile. So what do I mean by that? If there's really, really bad weather, I mean, it's the UK, it's going to happen. You might have a flood. We've seen quite a lot of that for the last couple of years. We make sure that the availability zones are far enough apart that they're on a separate risk profile. So if there's a flood in this geographic location, this one's still okay. But we make sure they're also close enough together to allow that asynchronous replication and that constant connectivity, that information flow backwards and forwards. And for us, security is at the heart of absolutely everything that we do. It is the highest priority for AWS. And it comes down to cost and scale, right? Cloud-based organizations are huge organizations with significant budgets, which means that actually we can afford to continually update security, do all of the maybe patching that you might have done in your local police force, make sure that technology is constantly updated and working constantly. It's not costing anywhere near as much as it would do for a small police force. So again, you've got that constantly on, constantly available, far enough apart but close enough together, secure foundation where actually we put security into the very basis of everything that we do and we build on top of that. And then in addition to that, we work with individual customers to look at their additional security needs. And so AWS works with customers that are everything from a startup to some of the most security sensitive organizations like the CIA. I mean, generally when people hear me say that, they think that I'm lying, but actually the way that the technology is built and architected, fundamentally security is in its DNA. And then we work with those customers to look at how they want to encrypt their data, whether it's encrypted at rest, whether it's encrypted at transit. And then we make sure we build policy approaches with them to make sure that actually the only people that can access that information are the ones who should have access to that information. At AWS, we can't actually see the customer's data. We do not decide where it sits. That's Dan's decision. If Dan wants to put it in the UK region in availability zones 1 and 2, but not 3, that's Dan's decision. And we support him then in the architectural design to make sure that that's what happens. And that goes some way then to looking at any additional concerns that you might have in case going back to the old days where you could have a cable cut. The reality of it is that infrastructure and the way it's been designed, everything is constantly rotating, moving around, and then we build the solution and architect that solution on top of that for the additional resiliency that's required by the individual customer.
This is all quite high-level stuff, Dan. It's quite hard to picture sometimes. So with time against us, I'd like to finish on a nice example, if we can. I think you were telling me about the training opportunities that you can use with cloud computing.
The training opportunities will be, Rob, with the Hydra-esque tool. But before we go on to that one, because I think that's a brilliant one to finish on, the bit from our side is we all know about the budget constraints that we have as organisations. I mean, Bedfordshire Police is no secret. We've been in the media plugging for more funding and things like that. But this is a time where we can't afford not to be in the cloud, effectively. We haven't got the luxury of an endless pot of money in-house for our in-house on-prem architecture, for constantly bringing in all those new servers and all of that security, pen testing and all the other things that we need to do locally. So why would we invest there if we can move into the cloud, utilize AWS, their expertise, everything that sits behind that, and then pivot to, well, how can we build capability to make our frontline as efficient as possible so that we can service the public as best we can? And it's not about resources, it's about technical capabilities to enable our resources to deliver the best service. And using the cloud enables us to do that because we're not spending that resource time and that budget time in IT infrastructure, our side, when we can put it their side, effectively is where we need to be. But Rob, I think you were explaining to us and I likened this to, for those that have been in the policing or the control room, the Hydra sort of simulation suites in the control rooms and having to go away and do those. And they're quite archaic, like fax machines and things like that. But the technology and using the cloud that Rob's was demoing to us it's just that absolute leap, isn't it? In, again, where the public think we already are is where we should be.
So we've been running a proof of concept with beds where we've simulated the entire control room. Now, the reason for this we couldn't do this without the cloud. We couldn't do this without AWS. What we've actually built is a back-end simulator where you can build a simulation nearly in real time. So say there's going to be a knife attack, or some people are going to be going into a football ground on Saturday with machetes or something like that. You can actually build a simulation for that and then actually train the staff in the control room. Predominantly for Oscar 1s and Oscar 2s, but that's going to be expanded out to the rest of the control room. The reason the cloud's important is you can take an open room, put some laptops down, set up the training, and we can simulate the entire control room in real time in under 10 minutes setup. And that means complete training and control is there. The reason we need the cloud is we have a series of runtime AIs simulating people on the ground, simulating other operators, simulating events, and actually controlling the whole of the simulation. So we have all of these AIs, which you just could not do on premise. Just totally impossible. And the AWS with Bedrock, what we can actually do is have all of these AIs running, and the user just sees in an entire replica of their desktop that they see in the control room, just with artificial feeds coming in from these AIs. And with that proof of concept done, and hopefully that's going to grow, and then we'll be able to take on lots of other services for training control rooms. But that's really fascinating. And at the end, deliver learning outcomes in case of maybe people that haven't learned the right things or don't know things. We analyze all their actions and then build a training manual for them at the end for them to learn.
I know
I
we're
think that's
short.
what we use AI for.
Yeah, I know we're short on time, but can you imagine, like, every time there is a major incident, every time they investigate the response and the outcomes, almost every time training is called out as a partial reason towards how a response did or didn't go the way it should, as quickly as it should. So using artificial intelligence to simulate a call situation, to allow the officers to go through and make decisions in a safe environment so they can try it and see if it works, is probably one of the most powerful training tools that we are going to have for the next generations to come. It's so incredibly important to be able to train in a safe environment, but make sure that it's realistic.
And replicate our data quality issues in the training data. That's one of the good things about that environment as well, because we all know what those data quality issues are like in our source data, but the training data is always perfect. No, make the training data the same as our source data so that we can have a realistic training scenario.
Amazing, fascinating. It's crazy to think PNC rolled out in the 1970s. That was the big computer evolution of the time. And 50 years later, here we are, and this is what's happening. Dan, Charlie, Robert, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for listening. Remember that by taking time to learn from our speakers, you can earn CPD points from our partner CPDme. So do check out the link in the show notes. Our thanks to MSA Safety for their continued support for our podcast, and Smart Digital for producing this series. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times.